Well, good afternoon, my fishing brethren. One of my first boats that I ever had that I absolutely loved was in the early 80s. It was a 1983 Skeeter Wrangler 150, and I had bought that boat. It was sitting out in the field somewhere. It needed a lot of work, and I brought it to the house, and I started restoring it. Some of you guys might remember that from early on, and I got it kind of ship shape, and I fished it for about a year and a half, and then I needed something a little bit bigger in order to tournament fish, which was what I wanted to do, and I had to get a bigger boat, and so for this particular boat, that Skeeter 150, I gave it to my father, and he's fished out of it for a couple of years, and he determined over the past couple months that the transom was giving out, and it had rotted and needed to be repaired. So the conundrum set in. We either get him another boat and scrap this one completely, or we get in there and we try to figure out if we could fix it ourselves and do a decent enough job where we felt comfortable putting it back out on the water with a motor behind it. So that's what we're going to go over today. This is part one of a transom restore from a 1983 Wrangler 150 Skeeter Bass boat. And the process that we're going to go over is pretty simple today. You got to take the motor, you got to disconnect all the pieces and parts from the boat itself, you got to remove the motor, remove the jack plate. In our case it has a jack plate, in some other people's cases it might be a tilt unit or something like that. You got to take that off, and that way you can get to the transom itself, and then you got to cut that sucker out in some way and take all the rotted stuff out, put in something new, fiberglass over it, and then restore it back to some sort of original condition. That way you can put the motor back on and it feels solid and you feel comfortable running it in the future. So part one today, we're just going to go over very briefly how to get the motor off, all this and that, and then also cutting into the transom itself. The video that we shot, because it took a little more work than we had anticipated, what I was originally going to do was to video and kind of talk over that video as my dad was doing the actual work. That didn't turn out well because I needed to do some things too. And so what I did was I just got some bits and pieces of video here and there while we were working together and doing some things. And so what I'll do is I'll just kind of talk and narrate over that for this first part. And then the second and third parts, as I post later on as they come in, I think I did a better job of being able to just kind of talk over the video live as we're doing it. So if you have any questions about how we started this process, leave them in the comments below. I'm going to do my very best to link all the products that we used. I'm going to do my very best to answer any and all questions that you might have about restoring your own transom. It's really not as difficult as I thought. Just about like everything else, that once you dive into it, once you get in there and you start figuring things out and what to do and how to do it, it's really not as difficult as you think. So I hope this gives you a little bit of information about how you might do this. If you've got an old boat or even a new boat, you could go in and fix the transom yourself. We did all of this from beginning to end, and from complete tear down, reconstruction, rebuilding, refiberglassing, re-gel coating, the whole kit and caboodle. We did all of it for about $500. Now, if you take your boat, new or old, to a guy and he restores it, he fixes that transom himself, he's probably going to charge you at least $2,000, maybe more than that. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of courage to do it yourself. I hope you enjoy what we placed together. Like I said, what I've got going on right now is just a strung together video of this first part. I'll talk over that, and then at the very end of the video I'll come back and I'll give you kind of a conclusion, and then we'll go to part two. Hope you stick around for part two and part three, possibly part four, depending on how long it takes us and what that last step is, and I hope you enjoy. So I'll attempt to dub over here as we go forward. We got a Wrangler 150, I believe it's a 1983 model, and you just start in the very back by removing the engine, and it's really not that difficult when you get in there and you kind of start figuring out what goes where. And one of the things that we learned early on was all the bolts and nuts and screws and all that you're going to take apart. In our case, it was going to be about a month and a half before we got this whole thing put back together. And so we took all those screws and all those pieces and parts and we put them in bags and we labeled them. And we put all that stuff together and we kept it with the boat. And that way, whenever we go to put all this stuff back, we'll know where it is. One of the more difficult things about this particular motor was the steering cables. And it really wasn't that big of a deal when we kind of got in there, but one of the things we struggled with was finding the right tools. And I would urge you to start looking over your boat if you're going to do this, and start gathering up the necessary tools and get the right tools and get tools that'll fit and make the job a lot easier and a lot quicker. Again, the steering cable here, it came apart just fine, and thankfully was able to slide off, and we didn't have to take out the steering cable through the through the side or through the boat itself. My dad had this old stand of some sort. We didn't have a cherry picker, so we used this stand. Now, he had originally used this for picking up scrap metal and some other things, so I think it had a 400-pound weight limit, and it was plenty for this old boat. It was a 85 Evinrude that we took off here, and we built a little stand, as you can see. And I would say one thing about the stand: if you're going to build one to put a motor on, go ahead and spend the extra money and get some caster wheels that actually that are meant for heavy loads. We broke 2 of them off trying to put this thing back together. But there she is. We rolled the boat out so we could move the stand, and it really worked well. It was very easy and a lot more simple than I thought it was going to be. And so we're just trying to center it here, and then we'll get the engine out of the way, and we'll put all the bolts and everything in those bags with the motor, and that way we can get back to it whenever we need to. But from there on, once we get the engine bolted to this little stand, we don't have to worry about it again until we put it back on. So it's really nice. Now we go and we got to deal with this jack plate, and it's just nuts and bolts into the back of the transom. That's all it is. So it's not much to it. If you've got a trim unit back there, it might be a little more complex, but I don't think so. I think it's just the same principle. You've got a transom, and your bolt is going through it, and it bolts on the jack plate or the trim unit, and you just take those out. And here we're just taking the bolts out of the transom to get it all clean. And from here, we're actually going to take off the top cap here, and for the first time we'll be able to see what the transom looks like underneath. And so there had been some work done previously, and you could see some Bondo and things kind of a little shady. But they had done some work back here, and it didn't look good. We weren't very happy with it when we got everything off. It looked like somebody had really just not spent any time and not done a very professional job at all. So we're a little disappointed. When we took this railing off, we thought it was going to be open where we could see down into the transom itself, but these old Skeeters have this kind of a lip on it, and it prevented us from doing that. And in order for us to see the damage, the only option we had was to cut out the transom itself under. We were going to do this anyway, but it was kind of it was a little bit of a bummer not being able to see down in it, but such it is. So we use this little tool. I don't really know what you call this tool. I do know that it's a great handy little thing. We have since used it for a variety of different uses. It's really neat. I think they just call it a multi-tool, but man, if you can find one, I'll put a link in the description so you can get access to one. They're amazing little tools, and I don't think it even costs that much. You know, probably $75 to $100. Anyway, nice little tool. So you can see all the water that is coming out. Now, what's blowing out there is not water, but Dad's coming in here, and we're separating this whole material from the transom itself. And so we're just cutting that out, and it's very thick. It was thicker than I thought it was going to be, about 1/4 of an inch thick. And this is that old Skeeter Kevlar hole, and so it took some doing getting it off, but just a little tenacity and patience, and it comes off. This whole thing, we just slipped that off, and we set that aside. We're going to clean that up later, let it dry. And you can see now's the first time we're getting to actually see the condition of the transom, and it is absolutely rotted and spoiled, and it's just gone. And as you can see right there, it's very, very soft. So we knew we were doing the right thing. So the next step here, just getting all the wood out of the transom itself. If you have a composite transom, you're probably not dealing with this problem, so you don't have to worry about it. But this old plywood, it just soaks up the water, and it's ruined. Even if you dried it out successfully from here, there'd be no strength or rigidity left in your hole, or excuse me, in your transom back there. So at this point, you have to replace it. There's nothing else you can do. You have to go in, you get all this junky, rotten material out, and you have to replace it with something different, and we'll kind of walk you through that in part 2. There's nothing here that you need to be timid about. There's nothing that you can mess up. Thankfully, the wood itself does not go to the wings of the boat. It stays right here on the back, and so that's the only part of the transom that we had to worry about. And we just made sure to get in there real good and get all of that rotted stuff out of there. After this, we kind of realized down there below this, you can see the 2 inlets that brought water into the live well units, they're going to have to be replaced and taken out as well. So we originally thought, well, we'd just cut these end caps off and maybe we could get in there and kind of figure it out from there, but it just didn't work for us. So what we ended up doing was actually, as you can see, we took these off and then we just cut down farther under it. You can see the 2 bolts down there below. And so we actually cut more of the transom out than we were going to previously. It actually ended up being the right thing to do, thankfully. So from here, you just continue to clean up this whole area. All in the sides is this wood and fiberglass kind of mixture, and you just got to get in there and just clean all of that stuff out of there. And then here we kind of have the final finished product. So really getting to this point wasn't that big of a deal. We took the motor off and we removed everything and we cut this back end off of it, and we got all of the wood out and the fiberglass mixture out of those sides. And luckily the transom doesn't go to those wings there on the left and on the right. That boat kind of has this weird hull shape where there's wings, and we were worried that the wood and everything would go all the way to the sides and we'd have to take that out as well. Thankfully that wasn't the case. But we do have to get this dry before we can go on to step 2, and we're right in the middle of the winter, and that was a challenge. And so what we ended up doing was we just, once we got everything finished, we just tarped it. And from here, we made sure it was watertight, nothing can get in there. And then we also put a heater under it to make sure that all that water was sucked out of there. Well, I'm sorry about the really bad lighting. I actually was working outside and it looked pretty good, but had to come back in and start raining on us here, and we're so thankful for the moisture, so we'll take it. That's part 1. This video is just an introduction really to part 2 and part 3. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of how to actually replace that. We're not going to use wood. We're not going to use marine plywood or anything like that. We're going to use a special product called Cusa board, and I'll introduce you to that next time. And we'll also go over how we put all of that adhesive in there. We used West Systems, and I'll put that in the link. I'll put a link to that below also. You can find that. So all the resin, the fiberglass, the tools that we use, all of that's going to be down below. Stick around for part 2 and part 3, possibly even part 4. Just depends on how much information we have to get out. If I can put it into 3 videos and make it look good, I will. If I need an extra one, especially for the end, the gel coating and making that all look nice in the back, I'll do that as well. So that's the plan, that's the idea. Hopefully you stick around for that. I hope you enjoy what we put together. Ask questions. I know we kind of went over all of this stuff real quick here at the beginning. If you have any questions about what we did, comment below. I'll answer all questions as long as they're pertaining to the video. I'll answer any questions you got, and make sure you guys can get all of that information if you're planning on doing this in the future, or if you have a project or anything like that. So thank you guys for watching. I'm excited to get back to making some boat restoration videos, and also if you'll go check out earlier in my channel, we got that boat from hell. That's coming too, and so I'm really excited to bring that thing back out of retirement and get to work on it. So God bless you guys. Have a great, safe afternoon. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.